Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Barry Roseman. I'm a visiting professor in visual communication at the University of Oklahoma. I'm happy to have you here. Um, the title of my presentation is Airline Identity in America, 1950 to 2000. Um, Innovation through modern design. Because of the time restraint of my talk, I have not included the identities of several airlines that were also affected by modern design, notably Delta, Western, Hughes Air West, Pan Am, and JetBlue. My sincere apologies. I hope to expand the talk at a later date. So I actually grew up in a small town in West Tennessee. My parents were both from the Northeast. My father was from Boston and my mother was from New York. So my family flew to the Northeast a lot, primarily into New York. And I have three really memorable trips that I took in my childhood that I'd just like to talk about. So one was I flew on the Bach 111 in 1965 from Memphis to Dulles Airport, and it was about a year after Dulles had opened. I flew with my father. I remember this very clearly, from New York to Memphis on the American 707. And so this is really funny, the chronology of this. My parents put me on a plane in 1971 from Memphis to Chattanooga, and I flew on the Southern Airways Martin 404, stopping in Muscle Shoals. So that is that, and we're going to go to the next thing. Before I discuss modern design that evolved in the American airline industry, I'd like to show you what was happening in Europe. This is the marvelous symbol that was designed by the graphic designer Rolf Bircher for Swiss Air. Bircher had a specific aesthetic philosophy concerning this logo problem. The purpose of a signet or a logo is to provide a visual representation of the article or line of business which it typifies. The less complex and the more simple its form, the easier it is to identify and interpret. Aviation signifies the quickest connection between 2 points. Air communications are horizontal ones. The signet must neither be drawn vertically, up or down, not static, but dynamic. It must seem to be in the act of flying. So this was the DC-8 with the Swiss Air identity. And I want you to know that these letter forms were not from an existing font. They were hand-drawn, and the design schools in Zurich and Basel were known for their rigorous programs in letter form design and typography. Another important factor really having to do with airline identity in the United States during the 1960s and graphic design in general in the United States was the design of three typefaces in Europe in the 20th century. The development of two sans serif typefaces in particular in the 1950s by Swiss designers Helvetica and Univer. So welcome to my Typography 1 class at the University of Oklahoma. And later you'll see an example of Futura that was used for Continental Airlines in the early 1960s. But in the early 1960s, Lufthansa was using a serif typeface, but as you can see, beautifully letter spaced on this 707, I would say. And later, Lufthansa used Helvetica in all caps, as shown in this Boeing 727 here at Dusseldorf in 1964. One of the most influential graphic designers in Germany, Otto Eicher, redrew Lufthansa's famous crane and employed Helvetica upper and lowercase for the Lufthansa wordmark. Here is the classic Boeing 737 photographed at Hanover Airport. Eicher continued to be involved in other major projects. He led the design team for the 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich and for overseeing the creation of its predominantly system of pictograms. He was also founder of a very important industrial design school in Ulm, Germany, that was known as the Second Bauhaus. And also there were interesting things happening in the Netherlands with this, as you can see, this graphic on the Electra freighter from 1963. I don't know any airline in the United States that was using a stripe motif on the tail. So I think this was really unique. And later, a German immigrant to England, Frederick Henry K. Henrion, was one of the first graphic designers to form a graphic design studio, and KLM, Royal Dutch Airlines, was a client. He brought the KLM stripe motif to a new level, using them not only on the tail, but also along the windows of the fuselage, unifying them horizontally. As you can see, this DC-8 was photographed in Athens in 1973. And here is the DC-9 in 1971. Stunning, I think. And the KLM logo was always encased in a circle. Again, emphasis on geometry in the form. A different type of modernism was evolving in the American Airlines system in the early 1960s by an industrial designer, Raymond Loewy, for TWA and United. The globe became symbolic of TWA's round-the-world flights. Loewy's versatile firm also designed cars for Studebaker, tractors for Harvest International, and the livery for Air Force One. And here's the livery of the Boeing 707, part of the great Starstream fleet. And TWA added the DC-9 to its fleet in the mid-1960s. What a beautifully designed ad featuring the globe logo and the interesting cropping of the photograph. Gold became an important color at TWA to communicate elegance. And I would say if you were flying during this period from, let's say, Cincinnati to LaGuardia, you might be on the little DC-9. Loewy recognized United Airlines had a visual equity in the shield symbol, as we saw in Paul's presentation before mine, which was the perfect prelude to my presentation here. And Loewy modernized it beautifully with better sans serif letter forms. United also developed a beautiful design scheme emphasizing a less cluttered appearance for its timetable covers during the mid-1960s. In these timetables, there was a wonderful symbolic map that summarized United's route system in a simplified way, and I think it was really fantastic. Here's the livery for the United fleet during this period. Here's a Boeing 720 at O'Hare in 1967. I assume Loewy's office did this design work, but I'm not absolutely certain. It's something for me to further research. Notice, though, Loewy's shield is not on the tail of the plane, but is very small at the front of the fuselage. Unfortunately, the advertising associated with the Friendly Skies theme dictated the livery for many years until 1974. This was not the most positive trend in the airline corporate identity world in the United States, but the visual result reflected American pop culture in a way where the slogan of the airline infiltrated every aspect of the airline's identity. American Airlines was one of United's major competitors besides TWA, especially in transcontinental travel. Here is the first Boeing 707 Astrojet in flight delivered to American from Boeing. The famous New York advertising agency Doyle Dane Bernbach simplified the eagle in between the two A's in a symbolic manner and created an emblem which often appeared together with the Astrojet emblem. It's interesting, the patriotic colors of the American flag were not used here. The AA word mark now appeared in super italic letter forms, which symbolized the jet age of the Boeing jets that American employed. And here is the Astrojet livery with the Doyle Dane Bernbach emblem on the tail. This is a Convair 990. And I know that this aircraft operated on the Memphis, New York route because I took that aircraft at one time. Beautiful. And here is the charming BAC 111 Series 401AK, known as the 400 Astrojet. In the mid-1960s, a major design firm with offices in Chicago, Detroit, and New York, Airliners International, was engaged with American Airlines management to overhaul the airline's identity. An Italian designer trained as an architect in Venice, who became self-taught as a brilliant typographer and graphic designer, was an influential presence in the design team at Unimark. Massimo Vignelli had the brilliant idea of using two Helvetica A's as the airline's logo. A New York designer, Henry Dreyfuss, created the eagle symbol to fit perfectly between the two letter forms. I'd like you to have a taste of Massimo Vignelli's design philosophy. On timelessness in design, we are definitely against any fashion of design and any design fashion. We are for a design that lasts, that responds to people's needs and to people's wants. We like the use of primary shapes and primary colors because their formal values are timeless. We like economy of design because it avoids wasteful exercises. It respects investment and lasts longer. We strive for a design that is centered on the message rather than visual titillation. We like design that is clear, simple, and enduring. And that is what timelessness means in design. And my family flew American many times from Memphis and Nashville to New York. They operated the most flights on the route. And all of a sudden, my Astrojet changed. Here is the stunning livery created by Unimark in the 1960s. It was also my first exposure to the Helvetica typeface. Vignelli is credited for bringing the typeface to America. And in fact, there is a documentary on Helvetica that I highly recommend. It's a fantastic film, and Massimo Vignelli is featured in that documentary. You know, I have to say, I think it was a very bad mistake that American made to end this corporate identity. I think it's an identity that could have been refreshed. And for me, the AA logo, it was a classic American icon. It was like GE or Westinghouse or IBM. What a pity. American created some great timetable covers with a standardized typographic format that varied slightly according to the illustration or message. I think these could have been designed so that the secondary typography could have been uniform, but notice how the tight letter spacing, characteristic of Swiss design during this period, seems to have been abandoned. But the more open letter spacing was more practical and readable for other applications, such as the livery. American created a timetable that was highly functional and was a magnificent piece of informational typography. And if you look at this timetable carefully, it even mentions the time zones. For instance, if you're going from Little Rock to New York, it states that you're leaving the central time zone and going to the eastern time zone. Fantastic, fantastic piece of typography. Fred Troller, a Swiss modernist designer who built a successful career in corporate America, designed two spectacular posters for AA. I don't know if there are any more in the series. This is something that I would like to research further, but I think they're fantastic because they communicate the idea mainly through typography. Eastern, which dominated the Northeast to Florida market with its Golden Falcon fleet, commissioned the famous New York design firm Lippincott Margulies to create a new identity for the airline. Lippincott Margulies had other big industrial companies in its portfolio, such as Esso, US Steel, and RCA. The Falcon was abstracted and reduced to a simple form placed in an oval. This approach, like American's new identity, was a radical aesthetic idea in American corporate communications. But somehow they sold it. The word mark really represented the sleekness of jet travel. And I think that you can see an interesting connection here between that earlier Swiss Air logo that I showed before. And here is the livery application for the DC-9. The DC-9 and the Boeing 727 in Eastern's fleet were known as the whisper jets because of the positioning of the jet engines on the aircraft. It was a clever marketing scheme. But I can tell you the DC-9 that I flew from Boston to Chattanooga did anything but whisper. But also the new graphic design on the aircraft was later known as the hockey stick. Eastern created many beautiful covers through the late 1960s. These are my favorite two. The airline also introduced a new advertising slogan, the wings of man. Here you can also see two different possibilities for the relationship between the logo symbol and the word mark. The Eastern timetable was a great specimen of typography at the time, just like the American timetable. The Univer type family was employed in this work. Beautiful, fantastic example of information design during this period. Beautiful. And here is the 727 Whisper Jet at the Eastern Terminal at Kennedy Airport. The Eastern Identity, you can see in the background, was effectively displayed on the terminal building. Isn't that a great photograph? Braniff was another airline that adopted a modernist approach to its identity. Here is the original livery for the BAC 111. This was actually photographed at Memphis, typical for all of its aircraft at the time. The strange use of heavy color at the forward section of the fuselage, nevertheless, was unique. And actually, this small photograph was the Braniff BAC 111 really en route from England to the US. Here is the unique BI logotype designed for Braniff by Alexander Gerard in the mid-1960s. This visual approach was unique in the airline world. Gerard was a versatile designer who was very color-oriented in his work. In 1965, he was known primarily as the director of the design for Herman Miller Furniture Company's textile division. In this year, he was also hired by Braniff. There is a whole saga associated with the approach of Braniff's new identity, and an advertising executive, Mary Wells, was also involved with the project. But, you know, this logo type was absolutely fantastic. I consider myself, I'm a typographer, I'm somewhat of a letter form designer. I would have never conceived of designing this fantastic bee. It's just right on. The idea of having the planes painted different colors was absolutely fantastic. and gave the airline an aesthetic appearance very different from the modernism of the American or Eastern identity programs. The simplistic approach was just perfect. The logo in black on the white tail, one color plus black and white. Fantastic. And so you see here the 727 and the Bach 111. And here is the 720. And you can really see how wonderful, what a great idea, the white engines with the white tail. Fantastic. The italic orientation of the logo and type were altered for the other side of the aircraft to coordinate with the angle of the tail. And here are some of the color combinations employed for the timetable covers, and these are from my own collection. This was the route map for one of the timetables. What a brilliant idea to combine this map with the photograph. Absolutely fantastic to suggest flight. And these were some of the simple graphic advertisements found in a Braniff timetable during that period. Really effective. And this was an example of the famous the end of the plane advertising campaign. This was very, very successful. Braniff also commissioned the artist Alexander Calder to decorate one of its DC-8s and a Boeing 727 for the bicentennial celebration in the United States in 1976. Then in the 1970s, Braniff deviated for reasons I don't know yet from its original identity. In its latest version, Garrard's original BI logo type was completely abandoned to a more generic script word mark. That was nevertheless unique in the airline industry, but I think this was all a big mistake, and this black logo on the white tail, just perfect. Why alter it? You know? Yes. 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 Right. Uh-huh. Well, thank you for that explanation. Thank you so much. So Continental was another airline that modernized its identity. with a unique approach. It was flying important routes such as Los Angeles to Houston, Chicago to Los Angeles, and Denver to Chicago and Los Angeles with Boeing 707s and 720s in the mid 1960s. It had a unique color scheme that combined black and gold. Again, I think the color gold for elegance. Continental hired Saul Bass and Associates in Los Angeles to create a new visual identity for the airline. Saul Bass and Associates was the leading corporate identity design firm in Los Angeles, where Continental was headquartered. Saul Bass's firm had many national clients, such as the Bell System and later AT&T, Hut Wesson Foods, and Quaker Oats. The firm created a new logo for Continental, symbolic of jet travel, and retained the airline's original gold and black color combination, along with red and orange. It was a striking and unique visual approach for an airline during this period. The transformation that Continental made was especially evident in its timetable. This is a magnificent sample of printed information design from this period. The cities were listed according to destinations, not origin. I'm surprised they were able to implement this idea. I'm surprised that they were able to convince management of this idea, because this was unlike any other timetable in the United States. Also, a symbol was created for each city. A lot of connecting flights with other airlines were listed in this timetable. That was also a unique quality. And on this particular page, Continental did not serve any of these cities that are listed. The Univair typeface was used here. The red tail of Northwest Airlines was an obvious visual asset for the airline's identity. But the airline's identity was confusing. Was it NWA or Northwest or Northwest Orient? Northwest hired Clarence Lee in the 1960s, a Honolulu-based designer, to redesign its identity. His design firm created this powerful abstract symbol that represented the red tail. One work of Clarence Lee you may recognize is a wonderful series of stamps he designed for the U.S. Postal Service, honoring the Lunar New Year beginning in 2004. Clarence Lee's design firm recognized the importance of Northwest's Asian network in its passenger and cargo business. Hence, the airline became known as Northwest Orient. Here is an example of the timetable cover design format the airline used for many years in the 1960s through the 70s. Of course, the red tail was retained. The logo appeared on the fuselage with the Northwest Orient wordmark, which was stylized to represent the airline. And in the 1980s, when Republic Airlines merged with Northwest Orient, Orient was discontinued from the airline's name. The new name was simplified. After all, Northwest flew to several destinations in Europe by now. Beautiful 757. Northeast was an airline based in Boston, serving many airports in New England and competing with Eastern and National on the lucrative routes to Florida from the Northeast. Raymond Loewy, who I spoke of before, is credited for the Yellowbird design, a brilliant strategy to appeal to travelers in the Northeast seeking sunshine. This was the first time a major carrier used yellow as its predominant color for its visual identity. Northeast produced a beautiful timetable. This was a sophisticated example of printed information design for the period. I would have liked to have been on that FH 227 flight from Montpelier to New York, stopping in Lebanon and Keene. Wouldn't that have been a great experience? Northeast eventually gained the rights to fly the Miami to Los Angeles route with Boeing 727s. One of the first local service airlines to embrace modern design for its identity was based in San Francisco. That airline was created by the merger of Pacific, Bonanza, and West Coast. Air West was indeed the airline that had to happen. It had a unique logo type that communicated flight and was graphically flexible. It could appear on two lines, as you see with this timetable color, or on one line for the fuselage of the aircraft. The Air West early timetables had a unique route map that was designed according to a grid, while the locations of the airports were retained somewhat in a geographic manner. It's astounding how many smaller airports Air West served in Arizona, California, Oregon, and Washington State. Air West developed a flexible color system that reflected the regions of the West that it served, the Southwest and the Pacific Northwest. In a way, it was an idea borrowed from the Braniff innovation. So the top photo here was the Fairchild F-27A at the airport in Crescent City in 1972. Wouldn't that have been great to have boarded that plane there? Air West created a brilliant series of posters that was influenced by Swiss modernism. The ideas of using one image, the extreme simplification of form to a symbolic image, and the unique cropping and positioning of the image in the composition. The logo type always appears in the same position at the bottom to create a consistent typographic system. The size of the type for the titles of the posters is determined by the width of the poster. but the titles always appear at the top of the poster format. So many thanks to Andy Zavelson at Chicago Vintage Posters for providing these images to me. In fact, he was just here earlier today. He is attending the conference, and I really recommend that you take a look at his posters in the second conference room. They are indeed spectacular. One of the most interesting local service carriers in the Northeast had the most unattractive identity, in my opinion. This was Mohawk. Interestingly, its colors were gold and black, like the Continental Golden Jet, but there were no competitive concerns because the cities served by both carriers did not overlap. Continental in the late 1960s was not flying to Rochester or Syracuse. This was the new identity for Mohawk that appeared in the early 1970s. I think this was very effective. The arrow symbol on the tail came from the new logo type that was created. The color scheme was totally unique and distinguished Mohawk from all other airlines. I don't know what design firm created this identity, but I suspect this idea was created in New York City and not in Syracuse or Utica. Future research for me to find out. Mohawk, of course, competed with American on the routes from airports in upstate New York to New York City. Mohawk created beautiful timetable covers in the early 1970s. My favorite is the one highlighting Chicago with the Picasso sculpture. Being the typophile that I am, I think the crossbar on the H is a bit too high. But this was a great design effort for a local service carrier. The timetable itself was really a typographic work of art in many respects. Unfortunately, the Mohawk modern design was short-lived because the airline was taken over by Allegheny during this period. Another local service airline that made an astounding change in its identity was Atlanta-based Southern Airways. Historically, it served many smaller cities around the South, including my hometown of Union City, Tennessee, with a DC-3 for 1 year in 1963. In the 1970s, Southern was growing beyond its region, expanding to New York, Washington, St. Louis, and Chicago, later to even Denver and Minneapolis, St. Paul from Memphis. Southern made a remarkable graphic transformation. It had hired the New York City area design firm Jack Huff and Associates to create its new identity. The new livery was absolutely perfect for Southern's DC-9 fleet. Southern became the second airline after American to use Helvetica in its corporate identity. After Jack Huff's design firm closed in the 1980s, he came to work for the New York design firm Siegel and Gale, where I worked for 3 years. And he was amazed that anyone had even heard of the Southern program. In my opinion, Southern had a more sophisticated look than its Atlanta-based competitor that was many times its size. And there was a fantastic timetable, and you open the middle of this timetable to this great spread of the Helvetica typeface, highlighting all of these nonstop routes that Southern was flying. The timetable itself was absolutely fantastic. And if you look carefully from Jackson, Tennessee, during this period, they were flying 4 DC-9 flights out of Jackson every day. And I took several of them. Fantastic. I think I always thought the North Central Snow Goose was a fantastic symbol for the airline. Unfortunately, the airline really didn't know what to do with it. I love both of these timetable covers. They're just fantastic. And, you know, I think the livery could have been much stronger in better design hands. And, you know, the fact of the matter is during this period, Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Milwaukee were not really, they were centers of advertising, but they were not centers of corporate identity design. So it's a shame that North Central didn't go to New York to have this work done. And actually, going back to the logo was actually designed by Carl Brocken in 1949, who was an industrial designer in Milwaukee. And then, of course, in 1974, United Airlines hired Saul Bass and Associates to redesign their identity. I think this is a fantastic design. The idea of taking the letter form U and making it fly, that was the design problem here. Here is an example of the DC-8 with the logo on the tail. And for the 727 here, the logo, again, had to be flipped to match the angle of the tail on the other side of the aircraft.
So which is the correct version?
Oh, they were both used. They were both used.
When it was first designed, going to the right?
No, it was designed to be in both situations for the aircraft. Yes, yes. And here, of course, was the old Frontier lackluster identity, I would say. And ironically, Frontier also hired Saul Bass and Associates to redesign their logo, this fantastic F, flying F in the oval. The interesting thing about this during this period is that here at Denver Stapleton, this was the hub of United, Continental, and Frontier, and the identities look so similar. So it was interesting that Saul Bass got away with this. Here is an example of one of the timetable covers that was redesigned. And I would just like to point out to you the one on the left. If any of my students did that with that letter spacing of Oklahoma City, they would get an F. I think this was one of the best symbols that was ever designed for any airline. And this was so exciting for me because this was happening while I was working in New York. The corporate identity design community actually was very small in New York during the 80s. There were really four predominant firms that were handling big national accounts. And I actually know Don Klein and Joe Finocchiaro. Joe Finocchiaro is a fantastic letter form designer who actually worked for all of the design firms in New York. And it just so happened that he submitted this idea to Don Klein, who was the art director at Landor, and this design was selected to be pitched, and Northwest picked it, luckily. I think it's so clever. It's absolutely fantastic. The livery, beautiful. The positioning of that symbol on the tail, fantastic. And this was also something new that was happening. Oh my goodness, a serif typeface was being used. So that really distinguished Northwest from the other carriers. Fantastic timetable covers. I collected these when I was in New York at the time. And wow, this great livery of the DC 951 photographed in Fort Lauderdale, fantastic. Maybe the gray could have been a little bit darker, but wow, what a great idea. And also, while I was in New York, a colleague of mine who used to work at Siegel and Gale was now working at Lippincott to design the new identity for Continental. Again, a serif typeface being used for the identity. Oh my goodness. And this was a brilliant idea in terms of marketing because Pan Am had disappeared. Someone needed to use the globe, and Continental was becoming slowly somewhat of a global airline. So, fantastic idea. And then I'm going to end actually with the United Airlines redesign that happened in the 1990s. This was work done by a very respectable, very well-known design firm in New York who had never had an airline account before, and this was Pentagram. And I think this was such a brilliant idea to take the tulip and crop it in this interesting abstract way, and then to add a gradation to it. And in a way, this really represented what was happening in design with computer technology during this period. We could do crazy things like this. So again, the on the other side of the aircraft, the symbol was flipped again. But what was so great was they maintained the original Saul Bass tulip design, and now they combined it with a letter-spaced sans serif typeface, and they gave that T. If you notice, the top of the T is cut at an angle to suggest flight and movement. Fantastic idea, I think. So I'm going to end it there. I do just want to say one thing. I plan to include this in my presentation. You know, the newest livery for the 787 for Alaska Airlines, if you haven't seen it, is absolutely fantastic. And it's moving away from this original modernist idea of design, but I think moving away in a very positive, creative, and innovative manner. So maybe next time I'll show that at the very end. So thank you so much for coming to my talk. I would love to talk with any of you afterwards, and happy flying.